Can you hear us online?
Test, test, test. Works.
Try jiggling the plug.
Yeah, that's
Follow it down to its power source.
Check, check. Leslie, Amy, Joe, Christina, can you hear me okay? And do you want to check your microphone before we get started?
there we go.
Yeah.
Subscribers, maybe you said that.
I got the...
Yeah, he's not here. Okay.
Check, check.
So does you guys.
Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2. Can we do a quick mic check for the online participants real quick before we get started? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call to order October 20th, 25 Finance, Building and Grounds Joint Governance Meeting. It's called to order. We move, item 2 is 2.01, Future Focus Finance and Capital Projects, Utilities, and Debt. Dr. Miller, would you like to start off?
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So this is our third of 4 joint governance meetings that we have planned. Again, this is a critical topic for our district, not just now, but for years to come. It's important that we're able to talk about these ideas, to share, have questions and answers, and share different perspectives. We have to be able to do that in a positive culture. And again, this is a topic important to our community. So not only is this a dialogue amongst the board and administration, but we're also the opportunity to inform our community. So tonight we're focused on finance and buildings and grounds. And our focus tonight especially is on the areas of green, long-term capital investment versus operational costs. We're going to talk briefly about the capital funding plan, but particularly as it relates to the idea of debt and our overall debt portfolio. We have Mr. Jeswick here who will be presenting tonight, and Mr. Antonio Masidi from PNC Capital Markets is here as well. Again, it's important we take just a moment to again talk about a strategic approach to a CLR-driven structural deficit, one that will get worse every year. So what we faced last year, what we face now will continue to worsen based upon the impact of CLR. This information is the same, but you can see in the middle of the slide the areas that we bolded are areas connected directly to the topics that we have in front of us tonight. And again, these slides are here as a repeat from past meetings. We're not going to focus on them specifically, except this one we have a small change. And so in the middle of this slide, you'll see a purple arrow. That purple arrow is pointing to a projected capital funding expenditure for next year that is significantly less than it was the last time you saw it. And you'll see that reflected on a slide that Mr. Jeswick will talk about. That idea of looking at our capital funding plan, we still see the overall cost in the next few years, but they have been shifted a little within those years, and Mr. Zimmerman is here as well to be able to respond to questions. Otherwise, that's the same information that we saw before. There are some misconceptions I think that we'll talk about tonight. You know, one is this idea of sort of historic increases. While the administration has made a recommendation for at the minimum the index increase, we see in our history that while the last 12 years have looked a certain way, there was a 3 times in 4 years we had an index increase at a time in Pine-Richland's history. So that is part of our history, and those that were here at that time know some of the challenges that the district was facing and what that meant relative to the budgeting process. The more than 8% increase you see noted in 10-11 is an example of that. And again, we talked about this last time, which is just following a median home value over time, and we see the difference between now and where we were even in 2013 is less, and that's due to the homestead exclusion. So this concept is, I would say, the most important one, and one where we have the most misconceptions that happen in not only in our district but in the community as well. And that's the overlap but differences between an operational budget and a capital budget. So in blue, these are our operational expenses, the things that we need to do every year. These are teachers and paraprofessionals and administrators, salaries. These are things like debt service, so paying off old bonds, or when we renovated or had to build a school or take out money in order to be able to do that. That's part of our operational expenses. Operational expenses are those annual recurring costs. Our challenge, the CLR-driven challenge, lies in the operational side. The CLR challenge has a small connection to the capital side, but as it relates to debt payments, that's part of our operational expenditures, and sort of our utility and maintenance costs. These are the annual costs we would expect to turn on the lights, pay the water bill, do all the things that you do in a home, we need to do as a school, and how our mechanical systems and other decisions impact the efficiency with which those systems operate. And that has an impact on the operational expense. But on the capital side, these are one-time long-lived assets. So these are our schools, these are our buildings, these are certain mechanical systems or roofing systems or flooring decisions. So capital expenditures are one-time long-lived assets. Best paid through, could be fund balance, it could be a capital reserve fund, or it could be a new debt. There are times when that's appropriate, times when that's not appropriate. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. There is an overlap, but they are separate issues. The biggest issue facing us is on the blue operational side. An example of a question that or comment that you might hear is the unanimous decision and our recommendation to replace the scoreboard and to put a video board at the stadium. The video board at the stadium was a capital investment. That video board was something that had been on the capital projects plan for a number of years. It is a one-time investment. The reason it was there is because the old board had been there since the stadium was constructed. It was reaching end of life, so our team researched a variety of boards, and they selected one that was in the middle of the video board. Part of the rationale that the board would have heard at that time, and again, the CLR-driven structural recurring issue is different than a decision like putting a scoreboard or a video board at the stadium. One of the important parts of that video board was not only can we use it for athletic events, we can use it for academic activities that occur there. We have a number of spectators and people that come to the stadium every year. Digital advertising was part of that recommendation. Even with the board, we set a target of $50,000 of revenue for digital advertising from that board. We met that in the first year, and we're on pace to meet or exceed that again in the second year. That is a completely different topic and discussion on the capital green side than the issue that is facing us now, which is on the operational side.
Okay, so as we get into the next part of, yeah, it's on. So as we get into the next part of the presentation, this slide, our first two meetings, as we went back, our first one had to do with staffing. That's 70% of our budget. And then the next meeting, back on October 6th, we went over our special ed and student services costs. But our next biggest bucket of expenditure after personnel, which includes salary, healthcare, and pension, is our annual debt. As you can see, that debt has been managed well to the point of us getting our rating bumped by Standards & Poor's to AA stable last April, May of 2024. That was achieved by elimination of variable debt, which can be very risky. We've refunded several of our bonds to capitalize on lower interest rates. We'll discuss that later. That's part of our struggle with calling some of these bonds and reissuing at a lower interest rate, is because those interest rates are so low at this point. When Standards & Poor's looks at the percentage of debt versus our overall expenditures, they include our operational expenditures and our capital. So back in 2013, you saw about 14.5% of that budget was debt, That's down to 8% today. So you can see we've kept it level at the overall expenditure, which plummets that percentage of debt.
So I have a question for you on that, just
Sure.
to make sure. So when you said that it reads the reduction of debt as a percentage of budget, budget being operational expense, which was that blue bubble.
Okay, yes.
Yes, is that what it represents?
And capital.
So with the Standards and Poor, they look at our operational and our capital expenditures.
Operational
and they put it
and
together.
capital.
So when you look later on, we have a pie chart. It will show 9.2% of the debt. That chart's based on the operational. When we're describing the Standards and Poor and what they base it off of, that's where we get the 8% because you add $7 million worth of capital projects onto $105 million of operational. They're taking that numerator.
Okay.
So
Over a
both
bigger-
numbers are right,
Yeah.
the 8 and the 9.2.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm just trying to, so that was helpful to say it was both operational and capital, and it wasn't just operational expense when we were saying budget. Okay, so that was helpful for me. Okay, what was the debt in 2013? It was 14 and a half. Do you happen to have it?
We're-
If you don't
we're-
have it off the top of your head, that's fine.
We're going to be able to see that in one of the later slides. So, and Mr.
Okay.
Massidi has the history with us.
Okay.
But again, we have reduced that debt expenditure. He's going to talk to that.
Yeah.
So it's closer to 9 million at that time, and now it's a little bit over 8 million.
Okay.
So we have actually reduced debt, not only as a percentage of budget, but as a
Yeah.
real amount that we're expending each year.
Good. Okay, thank you. That was clarity for me. Thank you.
No problem.
Last bullet, Chris.
Last bullet, 2, what's helped that Standards and Poor rating, where financials we have been paying as we go versus on taking on new debt. We haven't taken on a new debt issuance for a decade plus. I believe maybe was it 2009 possibly? Yeah. So we can go to the next slide.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. So we have to determine when is the right time to take new debt. As we look at, we are monitoring our fund balance as we try to balance our operational expenditures with revenue. We'll make that determination. We do back of the envelope or even the actual calculations where when you look at a new bond issuance, that interest over the life of that bond would exceed what we would earn off of what we're keeping within the fund balance by taking that new debt. Also within that new debt, you would increase operational costs at that point because if you look at a $15 million debt issuance, you may be adding around $1.5 million a year in expenditures. Would slow the usage up front, but overall the interest expense would get worse than what we would actually be earning interest-wise. That would outweigh that decision. As we all know, as systems get older, HVAC, roofing, your repairs get more expensive. So we've taken a strategic approach, especially with Mr. Zimmerman, to see when we are hitting that lifespan. If we brought in outside consultants to look at some of these systems, to determine, hey, you may have 3 to 4 more years because of the way you maintain them. Or we might decide, hey, they're at the end of life. So if they are at that end of life, we replace it because also these systems, these structures, they get more expensive to replace. So we kind of balance the costs of the two of replacing now versus kicking down the road to later. So as we go to the next slide, this will look a little bit different than last time you saw it. As you can see in 25-26, we had $6.9 million for our capital projects plan. Prior, even if you look back further into last year, we've reduced this down to 5.8. Now, you can see within the highlights here, we put in the black and red, those are projects we moved out that year. That's us constantly reviewing these projects, determining what we need, when we need it, what can go a little bit further out. And in the yellow highlight up top where you see the actual projects, that's where we move from a prior year to bump back. The other technique we've been using with some of this is we are trying to determine the actual cash flow of the projects. Such as this year, we have a certain amount with that 6.92 within those HVAC and roofing. And if you go back to 24-25, some of that project was not expended down. So we have $4 million, we would still pay out that $6 million, but that money is in the capital fund. We've also taken the approach as with the cash flow of the actual project keep as much in the general fund as possible to get that flexibility. We'll discuss that at a later slide. I don't
Okay.
know if you have anything. there.
Question on that. So in 27, 28, you've got Eden Hall HVAC equipment in yellow, also in black and red. Is that, it's because black and red says you no longer in the year, and then yellow says you've moved from prior. So
No.
did Eden Hall was originally scheduled 27, 28, right? So you're going to shift that to when, 28, 29?
Hold up 1 second. We shifted parts, so we don't have 2930. We moved part of part of that project with the Eden Hall HVAC equipment down to 2930, and I believe we left a little bit in that
We
27,
did. That
28
Eden Hall
year.
budget was split amongst 2 years, and the Eden Hall project isn't as well defined as the other projects. The older schools, the elementaries, we had those through a analysis from Tower Engineering from 2019 and 2022. We don't have that level of analysis with Eden Hall. Those were more of replacements for major components that go bad. So we didn't have a huge budget laid out there for Eden Hall. It was like $225,000 in 1 year and 500 in another. I think it added up to 750 total. So those are more projects that are a little bit further on the horizon, but we don't have fully scoped yet. But they fall in the window of the age of the equipment.
Okay. All right, so that's good. So Eden Hall has always been 27, 28. It was never in 26, 27. Just make sure I understand the slide.
Are you saying that it was in?
Go ahead, Mr. Zimmerman. Do you see what he's referencing?
I do.
I mean, I know it's split, so maybe, just to make sure we're clear, that's all.
The HVAC we have is in 27, 28 is 225,000, and then another split in 29, 30.
29, 30, okay.
Yeah.
So Eden Hall would be Eden Hall HVAC equipment split in yellow, and then you wouldn't even have, unless you had it all in, and then you decided to push it out to 29.
Yeah.
It's just looking for clarity on the slides.
So I think
understand what slide's
I
saying.
think the question of, if I say it a different way, what's the biggest change from 26, 27? It's splitting out the Hance Elementary HVAC.
Yes.
So why did 26, 27 go down? Primarily because of that project. And that's the same reason 27, 28 went up.
Yeah, but that wasn't the question I was asking. I understood 26, 27. That's shifted. Hance, because you see it in red, then it comes up in yellow in 27, 28. So it brings down 26, 27, brings up 27, 28, but I'm talking Eden Hall. It appears twice in the column.
Phil,
That's all. Looking
Yeah.
for clarity, what that means.
You want to pull up the,
Mr.
can you pull up the other who's, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ash.
No, I was just going to say, if I could ask Phil, or I think I understand what he's saying. I think just like Hance was split, like now Hance will be split between so Hance was no longer in this year, moved to the next year. Then Eden Hall will be split. So half of it was moved, and then the other half is not, because it goes forward. So it's where we can't see it now, 28, 29.
That potentially could be the reason why, and that's what I'm asking for clarity, because I don't see the word split on Eden Hall.
Eden Hall. Yeah, we didn't put in the split in Eden Hall, but we backed some of that out to 2930 because of the determination of the equipment when it
Okay.
was needed.
And
Yeah.
that answers my question.
Yep.
Thank you.
And you can, if we go back to the presentation. So if we're back to the presentation, you can see we shifted that 2.9, which gives us more flexibility within the general fund to move the funds where appropriate as those funds go down through the operational budget. So when we earn interest off of that additional 2.9 million, we have a little more flexibility with it versus automatically going, which we'll get, once again, we'll get in that as we go to this next slide.
So, Mr. Jeswick, really quickly before we move on.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that I understand it fully. We're spending the same amount of money in a time frame. It's just a matter of it being shifted from year to year.
Pretty close. There's
Okay.
projects we have removed because we didn't deem them necessary or a priority at this point. So they could be kicked out or eliminated completely.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I would just like to expand on that. So it's not that some of these projects aren't needed. So we moved out the Hans project because operationally, we're at a kind of a maximum point right now. We're going to touch 2 elementary schools HVAC for the second year. We're doing the terrazzo in the high school for a second year. We're going into the middle school next year, and we're going to do an asbestos abatement flooring project. So we're touching almost every school in a major way, and there's no way for the custodians and the maintenance team to do all of this work in 2.5 months, put the schools back together and be ready for school. So we felt that the Hans project, even though it's needed based on the age of the equipment, we felt we were in a good position because we've taken out 3 of the worst schools on HVAC repairs. Middle school was terrible, Wexford was right behind it, and Richland was starting to become a maintenance, just a lot of repairs for us. So we have 3 of those that have all new equipment. We'll be able to handle anything that comes up at Hans for a year. So we felt it was real safe to push that back 1 more year, and we'll still do it. It's still a needed project, but we felt that it made sense for our operational standing.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Zimmerman, the Eden Hall dollars that are allocated, as I think I understood you say, it's an educated guess. They haven't done the biggest analysis, and that would probably need further analysis down the road when we do actually
That's
approach
correct.
that.
And I think that's why the $750,000, I misspoke earlier, it's the $750,000 placeholder is in 2930. And that might move out a year or two based on what our analysis is going to be at the time. But
Yep.
we're not going to replace equipment that's
It's a
still in great
placeholder.
working order.
Yep, understood.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we kind of broke this out as a drawer example, as our total reserves when we had our budget. Some of those earlier projections were $39.2 million. That includes the general fund balance and the capital reserve fund. If you had that 9.95 plus the 29.86, that's where we end up. Expecting a little better results from that, and then after the drawdown from the outstanding projects with the 2 HVACs, we should be a little bit better than that number. But, so we separated these two. We have the overall total reserves of the 39.2. General fund balance, we have 29.86 possibly projected. We have that window. 8% is what the state allows us to have of expenditures that is unassigned. We don't want to go under our board policy of 5%. So we want that 5% to 8% window of unassigned. That's where we get into the other areas of assigned and committed. Within those, we can put assigned money or commit money to post-employment health care. We can put it to general health care expenses, put it aside for capital. Bottom drawer, once we move it into that capital reserve fund, and this goes along with the prior slide of why we've used that cash flow methodology with the capital projects plan versus funding the whole thing, is that gives us more flexibility, leaving as much money as possible within the general fund for expenditures to give us that flexibility. We can still earn interest off the capital reserve. It's just once you earn it there, it stays there, which was a great strategy prior when we were in a better financial situation a few years back, because you see the capital project plan, we were going to do those projects. So both strategies are sound. We're just shifting a little bit due to the current climate.
So so I gained some clarity here, so that when we look at 26, 27, or the 25, 26 year that we're currently in, the 6.9 million, that's likely to come out of that 9.95, that bottom drawer.
Well, we've added that we'll add that through the course of the year as these projects. We would add 6.9, so it would come out of the general fund, then go to the capital reserve.
So the capital reserve's going to remain at 9.95 even as we continue to do these projects?
It's going to come down a little bit because it has last year's money's still filtering. We try to fund as much as possible, even with the year of capital projects, to try to maintain some level of a capital reserve fund for projects out into the future or projects that have not been spent completely down yet. Because these, as we've went through these projects, we have 2 HVAC projects that are going over 2 summers. We have a flooring project that are going over 2 summers.
No, I appreciate that, but just so I make sure I'm real clear on this. We have $6.9 million, give or take, in 2025, 2026 of capital projects. If we wanted to, we could use that 9.95, that bottom drawer, the capital reserve, to pay for those projects, if we chose to.
You can.
Okay.
But also with saying we're going to spend next year 6.9 with a current 4.9, so say $12 million. Say we end up better around, say, $40 million at the end of the year, 12 million minus 40, we'll be at 28 million overall. So it continues to spend it down, whether we spend it out of the capital reserve or the general fund, it continues to bring those levels down.
Understood, but if it remains in the general fund, there's also a greater level of flexibility as to what you can do with those funds.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. That just looking for clarity here. Thanks.
Mr. Masidi?
And actually, maybe before Tony starts, Phil, I did look up your question about what was the debt service in 2013.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So this is audited number, fiscal year end June 30th of 2013, 8.6, I'm rounding, 8.6 million is what we paid in debt service. One more year out, in case you want that too, in 2014, fiscal year end June 30th, 9.4, or I'm sorry, 9.5.
So it's in 2014?
Yeah.
So it went up?
Yep.
Which is a perfect lead into this slide.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes, not sure if this is, everyone hearing this fine? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Good evening, everybody. And just to, point out here as the discussion has rolled on, the district has managed annual debt service as that component of the overall budget, and it has continued to take the approach of reducing that over time. Combined with that also is, growing expenditures over time, and thus the combination of the two has led
this
to
tree
a lower percentage.
back here is a live oak because it's wider than it is taller.
Mrs. Turchik, I think if you could mute, please.
Yeah, so to expand on that, the combination of the two, the expanding budget over time, as well as the continued approach of reducing annual debt service, taking advantage, as was pointed out earlier by Mr. Jeswick, that the annual debt service as a percent of budget has continued to come down, and that has benefited the district greatly. Along with that, the district's annual debt service actually did go out to a full 8 million plus in fiscal year 2039. So as you can see now, the district's portfolio, it has been shortened by 2 years, actually a little more than 2 years, as reflected by that lower debt service bar in fiscal 2037. And the whole idea was to continue to shorten the overall average life of the district's debt portfolio, as well as bring it down as a percentage of overall operating budget, so that, full well knowing that at some point in the future, the district may need to take on a more substantial project, especially one that may be more long-lived asset based, meaning another building, another full-blown renovation that might have a 20-year plus lifespan on that project, thus warranting a more leveraging of cash flow borrowing for that project. And the whole idea was to get the debt service shorter in life, the existing debt service shorter in life, and lower in annual cost. And that's what you're seeing here. And I will want to point out one quick thing here. If you look at the WAC there, that's the weighted average coupon, or the remaining average rate of the district's indebtedness. It's at 3.4%, 3.44%, and that is enviable. across many districts with the cost of borrowing. So with that being said, the existing debt, the refinancings that the district has taken advantage of over time has continued to bring that down. And comparatively, if you would take out a 20-year borrowing right now, you're looking at well north of 4.4, 4.5%. So the district's cost of funds that currently in hand, fixed and currently in hand, is approximately one full percentage above, or excuse me, below where you could borrow today. So that's a key point there.
So just a quick question on that, and I think I saw it somewhere in one of these slides, maybe a little further along, but if I'm trying to gain an appreciation for what current costs of borrowing would be, am I looking at the 10-year Treasury as a barometer?
The 10-year Treasury is a good barometer of where interest rates are, but remember that's a taxable proxy rate, and most interest rates will move off of that. And whenever you go out to borrow debt, you're typically borrowing for a lot longer than 10 years. So you're going to be looking around a 20 to 25 year debt plan. And again, but where interest rates are moving, the U.S. Treasury is a good proxy for what direction rates are headed.
No, that answered my question. And I guess, as I look at this slide, and I think it's the next slide that follows, I will admit, I appreciate the colors, but I'm getting lost in the colors and the shading of it all.
Sure.
But if I look at the subsequent slide, there's series 2017, 2019A, and then a series of 2016 with maturity dates of 2027 and 2028. So in that graph somewhere, those bonds are being retired.
Those bonds are being retired, and those bars represent not the outstanding principal bond, but the amount of debt service you're paying off of those. And the way that the debt service has been structured is that they layer on, the annual debt service payments layer on top of each other, so that you basically have level and or declining annual debt service that's required by the state. So you may see the shaded bars there, and I'm going to look at my paper here. I apologize so that I know exactly the coloration. When you look at the ones that will be rolling off soon, you have one that actually will is completely gone now as of
96A.
September 1st, which is
Right.
that bright yellow bar. So you can see that one has been paid off, and that debt service was stacked. Other debt service was stacked on top of that one. So now that one's completely gone, it did not have any impact from fiscal 27 forward. That was the fiscal year 25, 26. So that debt service is now matured and gone, and that just lowered that one payment, but it was part of this fiscal year.
Okay, so you just said, I want to make sure, you made a comment, I want to go back to, the level debt payment is a requirement of law or a requirement of the state?
That is a requirement of the state under the Local Government Unit Debt Act. You have to have level, annual, and or declining debt service. And that's the way you have to structure and approve all of your bond issuance.
Okay.
So Tony, so if we drop off Series 996A is gone, then we pick up, I think it might be 2015B, and we're adding more debt on that next year so that we can level off. Who makes the decisions? Who manages the debt level to make sure that we're even and so forth?
That's a combination of us as structuring each bond issue as it either is issued new as capital project debt or refunding debt of existing existing outstanding debt service, and bond counsel, who makes sure that the way that your new issue or refunding issue is structured meets the Local Government Unit Debt Act through DCED, and that's why you have to do the resolution that has to be submitted to the state for approval. And once you have that approval, then you proceed with the issuance.
Historically, how long have we been under state guidance that we have to keep level? When did that start? Has it been like many moons ago, or?
Yes, that goes back to the dawn of the Local Government Unit Debt Act.
Okay.
Yes. That's
right.
Nothing that's changed or that the district has control of. that's
Yeah.
coming from the state down to every district. Actually, every municipal entity within the state has to follow that code, whether you're a county, a township, a borough, a school district. The only ones who do not follow the Local Government Unit Debt Act would be a municipal authority, i.e. a water and sewer authority, an airport authority, et cetera. They run on their own resolution and their own code. But when it comes to municipalities, counties, school districts, everybody has to follow the Local Government Unit Debt Act.
Okay. What flexibility is sitting inside, how much per each series that we manage and put on that annual, on that year? Some are up, some are down, some are small. I mean, what flexibility do we have?
That's the ability to wrap, and it's a function of how much interest is being thrown off of your existing debt service. And a lot of this debt is legacy debt from the expansion of the district. So a lot of this legacy debt is from, really dating back to the 90s and early 2000s. So
Okay.
you're talking 20 plus
'cause
years
it's
now.
20 there.
And that was done as a wrap, and basically long wrap arounds, where the boards did not want to take on a lot of debt service in the current fiscal years. So they put the principal to the back end, and a lot of that is interest only. So basically and because of the rapid expansion of the district, that's the way it was done. All the principal was done in the back end, and the interest was wrapped around the current years. And that's where you get the stacking, if you will, of the existing debt service payments. And that allowed for lower budgetary impact today and a more consistent and level approach over time. And that's why, as the district's rating, the early ratings were in the low A category. But over time, as the district has approached not only its operational balancing and increased revenues and managed expenditures, but the refunding approach of lowering annual debt service and shortening the term, that's where you've seen the districts and the fund balance growth. You've seen the district's credit rating continue to rise as a function of all of those items. And as you start approaching the end of life for some of that legacy debt, i.e. the 96 A's that fully matured, that's when you start getting closer and closer to the end of that portfolio horizon there.
So while we're looking at this graph, I want to ask a question that I don't know if it's feasible. It may or may not be a good idea. I don't even know if it's possible, but is there an analysis? So we're going to, this chart in 2037, the debt of the district is paid off.
Correct.
And I would assume that, you'll tell me otherwise, I'm sure, are we beyond the call date on all of these bonds?
You either just past the call date on some of these bonds as shown on the next slide, or you would be approaching some as we get into 26, 27. 2030 is the next largest piece call date that's out there, the 2020 Bs. The series of 14B that's outstanding now, you're just beyond that call date, meaning you're now eligible to call at any point. And then that's 14.7 million. And the next largest piece is the 20 Bs. And that call date was 10 years from its last refunding. So that would be 2030 is
Okay,
when
so
that
we
becomes
don't,
callable.
okay, so there's some that we're obligated through to maintain that schedule, those coupons through 2030.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So,
And they're extremely low, currently outstanding.
yeah, so again, I'm not suggesting this. I'm just asking for whether there's an analysis that says something to the effect of that if the pressure stays on the Fed and they continue to lower interest rates, is there a point in time that makes sense to look at refinancing and maybe even extending the term on some of this in order to generate cash flow? So if we hypothetically could go from 8 million in debt service to 6.5 million, and I'm just making numbers up. I have no idea if that's realistic or even possible, but is that analysis possible, and is that something we could get from you?
Yes. If we walk through this slide here, I think this explains part of that, and I'll get
And Tony,
to-
let me just,
Sure.
so Mike, that's a great question, and that's what we historically have done. like whenever Tony's invited in, this is what we want to, those very questions is what we want to know. When does it make sense? And in fact, I think it was one time we actually took the savings today to help the debt service expenses, whereas most of the other times we shortened the debt time. So it's a great
Well,
time.
I guess what
Yeah.
I'm thinking is, you know, and I understand debt costs the district more money in total dollars. I get that. However, we're in a situation where the CLR keeps reducing our revenue, which is driving the deficit. So if we have an opportunity to refinance in such a manner that instead of we're looking at 10 years, maybe we're looking at 20 years, but we've reduced our debt service such that we now have $1.5 million or whatever those numbers are to put towards operational expenses until someday the CLR gets straightened out and we have a better understanding of our revenue.
So that's the slide. So cue the deer.
Yeah.
Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Kashani. I'll answer the kind of the second question first, if you may, or excuse me, if I may. Restructuring versus refunding, okay? Two different concepts. So restructuring would be, could we take some of our existing debt and maybe thin the annual payment, but throw the debt service out long? That's basically a situation. There have been districts that have done that. Mostly that's done out of absolute budgetary need, where they just have no other options. They can't meet the payments, and we need to do something. So basically, they'll carve out debt service from the next 1, 2, 3 fiscal years, and they will throw it out to the end of their existing debt horizon. So here, in that case, would be beyond fiscal year 2037. And that is, A, expensive if you're comparing interest rates, and B, taking debt that's probably running at or near its end of useful life of the original project that was financed and going beyond that. You do have to, under that same Laguda, you do have to pass a useful life test as well. And usually that runs that, if it's a brick and mortar project, and I am summarizing this to a large degree, but in short, if you have a brick and mortar project and the IRS code also gets involved here for tax exemption, is if you're going to go beyond 35 to 40 years on that, that starts to raise a lot of questions as to how far are you stretching out old debt. So you have to go all the way back to its original issuance, its original purpose, and run tests to make sure that you're not eclipsing 40 years and you're not basically saying to future taxpayers, you're taking on the burden of a project that was done for previous generations. So you have to meet a lot of tests for that before you start that restructuring process. It is possible, and especially if interest rates would go significantly below, and as evidenced by the 3.44% of your remaining portfolio, for that to either be break even or net benefit to the district, rates would have to come down significantly for you to be able to stretch that debt out for a break even.
So are we looking at a
proposition.
3.4 rate at a minimum, or?
Probably more, because you would take on added accrued interest for putting debt out much longer on the curve. So your accrued interest would be higher, your rate would be, a weighted average rate now on a 20-year borrowing might be in that 4.40 range. If you had to stack all of that principal on the back end, that weighted average interest rate would be higher than that. So it would probably need to be come down
So
lower.
there's a lot of moving parts to this.
Yes.
And it's not,
Yeah.
I appreciate your answers tonight and apologize for putting you on the spot.
No worries.
But I'm throw it open to my other board members here. I think we need to look at all options, and at least that's an analysis that I personally would like to see. And at the end of the day, it may be very evident that it doesn't make any sense, but I'd at least like to know that we turned over every rock.
I would
Absolutely.
agree. I would agree with you, Mike. I think these are excellent questions, and I'm taking copious notes here on what he's saying. But an analysis of that would be beneficial. There's a certain point where it makes sense, and and he says that there's not. And there's, like you said, a lot of moving parts we have to look at, but you can't just make that decision and say, now we're not going to do it. I think we have to do the analysis and look through it, so I agree with you.
Sure.
I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to see where we're able to, again, I would love to see us be able to reduce our debt service. The question is, what's the cost and how long's the term in order to do that? And then at the end of the day, we make an informed decision.
Right. I can provide that analysis for certain. And
Awesome.
I'll
And come
run
back
that
and
back.
explain it to us.
Absolutely. And I will come back and explain all the moving parts.
So the question is, so thank you for
Yeah.
that, Tony, and I think that would be a good, but we're going to need like the full hour to do that with you. Yeah.
Yes.
At least, so,
Yeah, multiple times.
Exactly, and because you would want to walk through each outstanding issue and look at its history,
Yep.
right? Because that's part of the analysis as well.
100%.
So that, and then if I may, I'll jump back to the straight refunding, not the restructuring, but the straight refunding. And as you can see, the series of 14B is edging closer and closer to economic efficiency for refinancing. And the district has always set a 3% net efficiency bar, which is really above kind of the common 2% plus is where a lot of entities will start looking at refinancing existing debt. The district has really looked at wanting, if we're going to go through the process of refinancing debt service, especially at lower interest rates, let's make sure we're getting, the overall benefit or the bang for the buck, if you will. So 3% has been the typical level of efficiency. So that's where we've looked at this analysis. And as you can see, that the 14Bs are getting closer and closer. We're only about 30 basis points away from that being the 3% efficiency mark. The next closest would be the 15Bs, and that one's about 70 basis points away from hitting that 3% efficiency mark. And if you look at that green shaded column and you take that arrow down to the bottom, there's an estimate of what impact would that have on our annual debt service to try to get those bars lower. You can see that the 14Bs would be approximately $55,000 a year in net benefits. So if you look at that horizon there, it might not even show up visibly on that graph, taking $55,000 off of the 8.1 million. So it's significant savings for the district over time. But again, it would probably, I think the 14Bs refund again would be the third refunding in its life cycle. So I always like to use the analogy of you start with a washcloth that is just dripping with water, and you just wring it and you get some more water out of it. And then, okay, can someone wring it a little tighter because interest rates came down? Let's wring it a little tighter. Okay, we get another half a glass out of it. And then as you start getting closer and closer to final maturity, you just squeeze that with the last drop you have remaining before final maturity, and maybe you get a little more, enough for a sip of water out of that glass, and you've exhausted every refunding out of that bond issue. And that's where you're at with the 14Bs. You're getting closer and closer to wringing that last, that last rung out of it.
Good.
So, Mr. Jessup?
Okay, with new debt discussion, the things we have to consider, we just discussed a lot here. Where are we at with our reserve position? Are we in an uncomfortable point? Or as that lowers, as we spend through our capital funds and our operational deficits could grow larger, when do we take that debt? We want to look at what type of projects. You would only want to take that for larger projects once we're getting in the $5-10 millions of dollars for long-term fixed asset projects. So we would have to look at the type of projects we would be taking that debt for. And then also, as I said earlier, we have to look at interest earned versus interest spent. In every scenario, we look at the interest you spend when taking new debt. It's gonna be larger than what you earn off that money as you make those debt payments to pay that down.
Mr. Masidi, how would you describe new debt versus restructured debt, which came up tonight for a first discussion point?
New debt versus restructured debt. I think you have that balancing act of restructured debt, again, is harken back to you have it at a low interest rate and you'd be putting it at a higher interest rate. So net, it's going to cost more money. And it's going to extend financing for a project whose useful life may either be at or near its end, where that same project you actually need to borrow for, or you're doing current maintenance on, and you need to do renovations or upgrades to. So now what you're doing is you're basically paying for that project duplicative in real time. So you're paying for the old project today, but you have to borrow for renovations, and you're stacking that on top of the existing project. New debt, while if you went into the market today, it would be higher than your existing debt on an interest rate cost of funds basis, you would at least know for the new project that might have a longer useful life, there's only one piece of debt outstanding for that new project. So that's the balancing act between the two.
Okay.
All right. This slide, this gives you the dates of our meetings and what topics we've hit already. The personnel total compensation, which included the special ed, the gifted, we're in that 70% range of our budget. That's the overall. This is all taken, these percentages are taken off our operational budget versus earlier in the presentation where we were discussing operational plus capital. Against the operational budget, that is about 9.2%. You see our upcoming meetings with the rest of the parts of the pie here, where we go over facilities and utilities, transportation, technology, cyber charter tuition. That will take place at the November 10th. This gives you an overall picture of how our funds are spent. We go back to the fund balance, where we minimum of 5% based on our own policy within the district, 8% of a max of your operation or of your total budgeted expenditures. You can kind of see where the age we were in from 2017-18 since the last tax raise. No tax raises within that time through this 25-26 year. So from 17-18 through 22-23, then you see the leveling in 23-24. No tax raise. That fund balance went up. Managed the district well. The administration team and Mrs. Kirk going back to that time frame. As you can see with common level ratio and the spend down of doing more capital projects, which we have planned out 10 years, there was an expectation of spending that fund balance down, but within that, with the common level ratio, that has slowed our revenue growth, and on top of just the general growth of the district slowing down with new builds, new construction, and such. And you can kind of look where when we get out to 27, 28, you see the green block. That green block is now what we would be missing to get up to that 8% area.
So again, we talked about a lot tonight, and if I think back, one of the images we tried to pull through the presentation is in the upper right-hand corner. That's the operational, which was the blue, versus the capital, which was green. There is a little bit of overlap there, and we talked about that overlap being our debt service payment, which we see has reduced over time, and it's a little more than $8 million right now. We've talked about potential considerations, one being a refunding of a certain issuance if the market moves a little bit more. That savings to our operational expenses, about $55,000 is what that's ballparked. We also heard a question about restructuring, which is its own probably area of study. But we would need to ask the question, how realistic or likely is that beyond being prudent in the short term, given the CLR-driven issue that we're facing? So just a few of our administrative recommendations. Again, these are administrative recommendations. One is we've talked the last couple meetings about filing for special ed exceptions. We believe we should do that. I've heard from a couple of board members who agree with that. If we qualify, it does not require the board to utilize that additional increase beyond a 3.5% index. So if we would know, it would be helpful to know if the holdover members of the board support that. If all 5 members support that, we can begin to work that timeline to be able to go out and see if that's a possibility for us. So that's the first one. The second, again, is our continued recommendation that we at a minimum go to 3.5% index as we deal with the CLR-driven structural deficit. We believe that's in the best interest of the district. That's why we have been clear about that. At our last 2 meetings, we've talked about staffing, both general education staffing and special education gifted staffing and other areas. The board has heard this for multiple meetings. While we will look at attrition, the reality of attrition, we believe, is we try to balance education excellence, community value with how we operate. We're looking at 1 or 2 or 3 positions very specifically as they may become open due to retirement or resignation. There are not going to be big movements there through attrition. We also believe it's important, again, we have mentioned this to the board, we do not believe furlough for 26, 27 is in the best interest of the district. That will require a combination of index type increases and still cutting 2.5 million or so from our expenses, or a combination of cuts and adds through other revenue sources. That's what we're talking about. And so we wanted to be as clear as we could about the recommendations that we have, for the board. And these are conversations that we're going to have, in public. We're going to have to be able to, as I said, ask questions, get answers, talk about difficult things. But that challenge of education excellence and balancing it with some of the forces we see here are critical. We already heard about this next meeting. And again, when we get back to sort of the work, the continued work is to be able to talk about what are those specific areas of reduction. What are those cuts? You're going to hear about that at the next meeting as it relates to technology. You're going to likely hear that in transportation, we don't have much likelihood of reducing expenditures. We have possibility of containing costs through continued good discipline and action, but part of the reason we added this circle graph is to go back to that idea of where do we spend most of the dollars, what are the biggest rocks in the jar, if you will, and are we disciplined, efficient, sound in our practices with those biggest expenses. We've talked about many of them already, and we're going to talk about more of them at the November 10th meeting. That means we have a much smaller slice of the circle graph to try to find those additional 2.5 million in reductions or adds. That's the reality of what we're facing. So again, our team will work extremely hard to do that. We will identify and bring forward recommendations on what that might look like, but there have been impacts already, and there will continue to be impacts as we make tough decisions and recommendations.
Mark, question for you. So share with the board your timeline. I mean, when we take a look at the budget, 25, 26, that's a done deal. We've approved that. We're moving on. So now we're talking about in the future. That's all these discussions because we're trying to get a head start on it, right?
Yeah.
Typically, this is very early in.
Typically, right, Phil, we're not starting the conversation until December typically.
Yeah, right.
So we're way ahead of that normal process.
Very good. That's how I see it too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
thank you.
think what Mr. Jeswick shared, based on the timeline, is if we're submitting for those special ed exceptions, then we need to have a preliminary budget, correct?
Yes.
By early
Around that
February?
end of January time frame would want everything approved. And we would be prepared for that.
Okay, good. Thank you for the preparation. And any parting questions, comments before we open up for?
I just have one comment that I support putting forth to explore being able to go above our act. I forget the number.
Act one.
Act One.
Act One. In order to keep our options open, just as Mr. Weethor mentioned, going into restructuring and covering all bases. I think if we're going along those lines, we should do it across the board. So I think would be prudent for us to start that process. So I'm in support of doing that.
So, but just, so I think we're on the same page, but what you're speaking to is the
Special education.
special education exceptions
Yes.
from the part, yeah, and I concur. I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes sense as well. I guess the question on that note, though, I must say, so this is the first time, Dr. Miller, I can recall, as opposed to just getting board approval to increase millage above the Act 1 index. So this is something in addition to that. So why that this year as opposed to just, increasing it above, if we do that? Because historically, we've done that if we needed it too.
Well, what we've done for the last decade is the board has passed something indicating we would not go beyond the index.
A couple times we did. Maybe
Yeah, but you're
long time ago,
talking
yeah.
15 years ago, probably,
Right.
14 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, so this is another way to give us the ability to increase above the Act 1 index, but I don't
Correct.
recall this ever coming up before.
Correct. It hasn't come up in the 13 years that I've been here, but the reason for that would be, as we saw at the last meeting, the increase in special ed costs as opposed to the revenue that comes along with the requirements we have, both morally and legally, to meet those requirements. That's why that special ed exception exists. So seeing if we qualify does not hurt us and provides other opportunities to consider
Okay.
for the board.
I just wanted to drill down on that for a sec, just so
Yeah.
that I understood. So that makes sense to me as well.
Yeah, the larger your increase from year to year, the
Because
more
it's
opportunity.
specifically tied to the
Special
increased
ed
cost
costs.
of special ed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Dr. Miller, you've heard from me before. I'm in support of doing that as well.
Right. So I think Mrs. Miller is online. She's the only other holdover member in terms of that question, Mrs. Miller, around applying for special ed exceptions.
I would support that
Okay.
exploration.
That's helpful, so then we can start to look at that timeline and have everything prepared. Thank you.
Yep,
Okay.
very good.
Thank you, guys. Good conversation, important conversation, and so thank you all for talking through that and sharing what's on your mind. So we'll move to recognition of visitors. Do we have anybody?
We do. We have 4 people.
Okay. All right, you want to get them in now? Okay.
Our first person is Jen Buse.
Hello, Jen Buse. I am a Richland resident. I have 4 kiddos, one who graduated, a senior this year, a freshman, and a 5th grader. And I'm a taxpayer. I wanted to talk just to say that to our financial guy. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but
Tony.
who is it?
Well, we call him Tony. Mr. Massey.
Mr. Tony,
Yeah.
your expertise was really appreciated. I learned a lot tonight from the meeting. And Mr. Morissette, actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Weethorn, I appreciated your expertise in questioning about the debt, how we could restructure that. I do hope that, I really appreciate your precise questions on that, and also Mr. Tony's ability to answer them just on the fly like that was pretty impressive. I did want to just ask, especially the 5 who voted against a modest tax increase last year, I appreciate Ashley mentioning, and actually Mr. Morissette, Mr. Weethorn, and Ms. Miller mentioning that they agree that we should at least apply for the exemption for the special ed increase, Act 1 increase. But the 5 who voted against the tax increase last year, I would really love to know what specific steps you think we could take to make up the deficit of $5 million. In it, like, are you willing? It would be really useful to me, just so I can plan for what to expect for next year. I imagine the teachers and the administration and the staff would really benefit from knowing if you do intend to increase the millage rate to the 3.5 or whatever the admin had suggested. And if, in addition to that, what other cuts are you thinking can be made? I hope we can hear some of that in the planning meeting tonight when we review the joint governance. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brianna Bear.
So from now on, in the agendas, we'll refer to Mr. Tony Masidi as Mr. Tony.
Hi, Breeberry, Richland Road. I'd like to question what exactly you guys think you're actually accomplishing for our district. It's been clear to anybody following this board that despite Mr. Kashani raising concerns over the budget for the last year and a half, you've refused to take your position seriously and come prepared to actually work toward a solution. You've got numerous in-depth proposals from Dr. Miller and our admin, yet you've given them nearly nothing to work with, and have thus far appeared to show even a basic understanding of the issues at hand. Instead of doing your jobs, you're allowing these budget issues to balloon instead of addressing them with this year's budget. So, Mr. Morissette, you were incorrect. You could have handled it this year. You refused to allow it to become a bigger issue for next year. You're prioritizing personal politics and manufacture crises over the actual issues in our district. I have 2 kids at Eden Hall currently and 2 more coming, and I'm furious the class sizes are already larger than normal, and you all are refusing to do anything about it. You've been voting against curriculum choices by our teachers. You're rewriting policies to give yourselves more power and control over things you have no business deciding. You're doubling legal fees. Where's the fiscal responsibility there? You're bringing negative press to our district through your shameful behavior and policy decisions. Your recent press history was literally the political mailer for another district, urging their community not to follow in your footsteps. How embarrassing. We deserve so much better than what you're providing us. You should want what's best for all of us, regardless of who voted for you. But instead, you've shown time and time again you're only in this for yourselves. You're alienating people that voted for you, people that supported your campaigns, and even your previous running mates who are now openly campaigning against you, Ms. Brusalis. I could not believe the audacity of Christina Brusalis sending out a mailer attempting to take credit for our teachers' achievements. This, where every move you've made has been to undermine and belittle them when stripping them of all autonomy. This, where you've scrutinized our teachers relentlessly and cast doubt on their judgment and expertise during every curriculum review you've ran. I was shocked and appalled to see you attempt to take credit for their hard work and dedication, where it's been you, I'm speaking to Ms. Brusalis, she's not here though, it's been your mission to micromanage and demoralize them. Our teachers deserve so much more than what you and this board are giving them. Please, I urge you to take these finance meetings seriously. Treat the budget issues with the respect they demand. Educate yourselves, come prepared and willing to engage, and speak out loud so the public knows where you stand. Don't jeopardize the future of our district and do the right thing. To the PR community, please vote to put an end to this board wasting resources in pursuit of their personal politics. Vote for the future of Pine-Richland. Vote against Christina Brusalis and her running mates on November 4th. Vote Delosa, Caffardi, Vecchi, and Augustine. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brittany Kindersmith.
Good evening, Brittany Kindersmith, Richland Township. I wanted to say thank you to those who were explaining large-scale portfolio management to us lay people this evening. I also learned a lot and was glad to hear that some board members say it was educational for them as well. While I do appreciate the idea of exploring all options and am not suggesting that it is an invaluable path to pursue, I wanted to speak to the idea of wrapping the debt around to later in its life. When I hear about needing to evaluate whether the origin of the debt remains within its useful life, I think about when I used to sell cars. I graduated in 2008 during the recession, so I could not get a job in my chosen field and instead sold cars. And there are people who, when they buy a car, they trade in a vehicle that has more debt left attached to it than it is evaluated as being worth by the dealership when they take it in. And it's called rolling your debt, right? And you roll it into your next vehicle. So essentially, if you say you drive a 2020 Cybertruck and I don't think they existed then. Let's say you have a Cybertruck and it stops working and you decide you want to roll it into a Dodge. You are then driving a Dodge for a length of time that it may become unuseful, the Dodge may stop working, and then you're going to need another car, and you could still be paying for the original source of the debt. When people come into the dealership and do that, do you know what we call them? Idiots. It is a really poor way to manage your money. It is not how I want to see our district manage its money, and it is not how we earned a AA standard rating from S&P. And if we choose to go down that path with our money, that is going to impact that rating, which will impact the cost of taking on new debt when we inevitably need to do so because we refuse to raise the millage rate. Please vote for Caffardi, Vecchi, DeLosa, and Augustine on November 4th. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Mike Barber.
Mike Barber, Richland Road. Mr. Kashani, thank you for running another productive meeting. I wish all of our meetings, our special meetings, were as productive as your financial-led meetings. That was an hour well spent. Thank you for your questions, Mr. Weethorn. It's enlightening. I like that line of questioning. Mr. Tony, thank you for your grasp of our finances. This is the type of meeting and information that we should have been having when we were dealing with the library policy. We should have spent 7 hours drilling down, letting Mr. Tony speak and educate all of us so that we can all have an understanding and a grasp of where we're at budgetary-wise. Mr. Kashani has been waving this flag, telling us that we are going to be in this very position. When I walked around the lake with him, I don't know how many years ago that was, that he just casually told me that this is the way that we're going to go because we are seeing our new, if I'm correct, new residents plateau. He's told us for years that we're going to be in this very position. Why did we spend over 13 hours split between 2 meetings, if I'm not correct, if I'm correct, speaking about the library policy that has never once been used since it's been implemented? We wasted every single minute at those meetings speaking about library books when we should have been focusing on this, money. I got a flyer from Miss Brusalis and her running mate, Chris Griffin, talking about fiscal responsibility, yet she hasn't uttered a single word. She couldn't be here in person. She didn't say anything. She's the only candidate out there that has all of this information, yet she remains silent. She sends generalization statements. She doesn't stand on anything. For 4 years, we haven't heard about any specific waste or abuse. The waste and abuse is every minute we leave her on the board. Vote Caffardi and Melissa Vecchi. They're sitting in the crowd tonight, right now. Please, on November 4th, make a plan to vote for the future of PR. Vote, if you are Region 2, Amy Caffardi and Melissa Vecchi.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Take 5?
Yeah.
I need 5 because.
Let's take 5.
Yeah, okay.